The night air in the Iga Mountains does not just chill the skin, it extracts heat from the core with the efficiency of a machine. A human body, motionless in the undergrowth for 18 hours, requires a caloric furnace to maintain homeostasis. Yet the lighting of a fire is a death sentence. There is no warmth here, only the damp, rotting scent of cedar and the metallic tang of adrenaline. The agent, a shinobi of the premodern era, reaches into a folds of a garment and retrieves a sphere no larger than a peach pit. It is hard, dark, and smells faintly of earthen fermentation. This is not food in the conventional sense. It is a tactical intervention. A chemical hack designed to force the human machine to operate beyond its safety limits. He places the sphere in his mouth. The taste is a brutal assault of bitterness and astringency, a concentrated slurry of ginseng, cinnamon-aldehyde, and oxidized sake, but within the hour, the shivering stops. The stomach-scraping emptiness subsides. The mind clears. The shinobi has not eaten a meal in 3 days, yet he is ready to kill. The logistical independence of the premodern Japanese operative relied on a sophisticated integration of botanical knowledge and metabolic manipulation that stood in stark contrast to the lumbering supply lines of the Sengoku armies. While the samurai required trains of rice and camp followers, the shinobi utilized a class of functional foods known as gan-yaku, or pills, specifically the Hyo-ryu-gan, to sever the tether between soldier and supply train. This was survival engineering at its most primitive and effective. The Hyo-ryu-gan was not merely a calorie delivery system, it was an endocrine control device. Its primary function was to suppress the biological imperative of hunger and to hijack the body's thermogemetry systems. The formulation found in the Rod Anshuan Ban Senshu I manuscripts reveals a precise combination of glutinous rice, non-glutinous rice, lotus seeds, Japanese yam, cinnamon, koiak seeds, ginseng, and crystallized sugar. To the uninitiated, this appears to be a simple, high-carbohydrate dumpling. To the chemical observer, it is a multi-stage release mechanism for bioactive compounds targeting the hypothalamus and the gut-brain axis. The immediate threat to an operative in deep cover is not starvation, but the distraction of hunger. The human stomach, when empty, secretes the peptide hormone ghrelin, which travels to the brain to trigger the sensation of hunger and the impulse to feed. For a surveillance agent who cannot move to forage, this chemical signal is a liability. The Hyo-ryu-gan encountered this through the inclusion of cinnamon, derived specifically from Cinnamon acacia. The primary active constituent, cinnamon-aldehyde, is a potent agonist of the transient receptor potential anchor in 1-TRPA1 channel found in the enteroendocrine cells of the duodenum. When the shinobi consumed the ration, the cinnamon-aldehyde bound to these receptors, triggering a cascade that significantly reduced the secretion of both OCT and OYL and ghrelin. This pharmacological blockade effectively muted the stomach's scream for resources. The data indicates that this activation delays gastric emptying, holding the nutrient bolus in the stomach for an extended duration. The agent essentially tricked his own digestive system into believing it was full, allowing a small volume of food to sustain satiety for hours longer than its caloric content would naturally permit. The shinobi were not just enduring hunger, they were chemically silencing it. Simultaneously, the ration addressed the lethal thermodynamics of the environment. In the freezing temperatures of a mountain vigil, the body's natural response is to shiver, a mechanical action that generates heat but compromises stealth and consumes precious glycogen reserve. The shinobi required a silent heat source. The cinnamon-aldehyde in the ration provided this through metabolic reprogramming. Upon ingestion, the compound acted directly on the subcutaneous adipocytes, the white fat cells stored under the skin. Through the activation of the protein kinase, a signaling pathway, and the phosphorylation of p38, APK, cinnamon-aldehyde induced the expression of uncoupling protein, 1-UCP1 on DEF-GF21 within these cells. This process, known as the browning of white fat, fundamentally altered the cell's function. Instead of storing energy, the mitochondria began to burn lipids directly to produce heat, a process known as non-shivering thermogenesis. The Shinobi was eating a compound that turned his own body fat into a biological radiator, maintaining core temperature without a single muscle tremor. This was the tactical anatomy of the shadow warrior, a body chemically modified to run hot in a cold world. The mental state of the operative was equally critical. The stress of infiltration, the fear of discovery, the isolation, the sensory deprivation triggers the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis, flooding the system with cortisol. While cortisol is necessary for the fight or flight response, chronic elevation leads to cognitive decline, anxiety, and a breakdown in decision-making capabilities. A jittery ninja is a dead ninja. To counteract this, the Hyo-ryu-gan incorporated panax ginseng. The ginseng seeds present in the root, specifically the protopanaxide types like RB1, acted as adaptogens, modulating the HPA axis and blunting the cortisol spike. They functioned as a neurochemical dampener, preserving a state of fudoshin or immovable mind. Furthermore, these ginseng seeds influence the expression of neuropeptides in the brain. They suppress the exogenic peptides NPY and DAG-RP, which stimulate appetite, while provoking the release of anorexic peptides like CCK and PONC. The ginseng worked in concert with the cinnamon, attacking hunger from both the gut and the brain, enclosing the operative in a chemically induced state of satiety and calm focus. The structural matrix of the ration was engineered with equal precision. The base was a mixture of glutinous and non-glutinous rice flours. The glutinous rice, rich in amylopotic, provided the cohesive stickiness necessary to form a durable pellet without modern binders, while the non-glutinous rice, higher in amylose, digested more slowly, providing a sustained release of glucose. This prevented the dangerous blood sugar spikes and crashes that could lead to hypoglycemic confusion in the field. Embedded within this starch matrix were Koix seeds and lotus seeds. Koix seed, or Job's tears, is an anomaly among cereals, possessing a protein density far superior to rice. It provided the essential amino acids necessary to prevent muscle catabolism during long periods of exertion. If the Shinobi was forced to run for miles after days of stillness, the Koix seed ensured his muscles did not consume themselves for fuel. The lotus seeds acted as a mineral reservoir, dense with potassium, magnesium, and phosphorus. In high-stress environments, electrolyte imbalances can lead to cramping and cardiac arrhythmias. The lotus seed provided the ions necessary to maintain the electrical stability of the heart and the firing of the neuromuscular junctions. The preparation of these rations was a discipline of patience and foresight. For the Kikatsu-gan, or famine suppression pill, the ingredients were not merely mixed but subjected to a multi-year fermentation process. Buckwheat, millet, yam, and ginseng were ground into a powder and soaked in sake for up to 3 years. This was not a culinary choice, it was a method of biological predigestion. The enzymes and wild yeasts in the sake broke down the complex starches and proteins into simpler, more bioavailable sugars and amino acids. For a starving man whose digestive fire has dimmed, processing complex food costs energy. The Kikatsu-gan arrived in the stomach predistiged, requiring minimal metabolic effort to assimilate. The alcohol also served as a solvent, extracting fat-soluble medicinal compounds from the ginseng that water could not reach, ensuring the full potency of the root was delivered. The result was a shelf-stable, nutrient-dense paste that could be dried and carried for months, immune to mold and spoilage, a dense battery of life stored in a pouch. Water, however, remained the ultimate limiting factor. A human can survive weeks without food but only days without water. The Kikatsu-gan, or thirst suppression pill, addressed this vulnerability not by providing water, but by manipulating the body's physiological response to its absence. Composed of umi-boshi pickled plum, sugar, and mondo grass, the pill utilized the extreme acidity of the plum to trigger a violent salivary response. The citric acid hit the tongue, and the glands erupted, flooding the oral cavity with saliva. This kept the mucous membranes hydrated, preventing the debilitating dryness that can compromise the airway and makes speech impossible. It allowed the shinobi to maintain the ability to vocalize commands or deceits even in a dehydrated state. Moreover, the citric acid entered the Krebs cycle, aiding in the breakdown of lactic acid, scrubbing fatigue toxins from the muscles during forced marches. It was a chemical light ode to the body, masking the symptoms of thirst to buy time and distance. The modern analysis of these historical recipes reveals that the ninja were not mystics, but early empiricists. They understood, through trial and error, the pharmacological properties of their environment. They knew that Dioscorea oppositae, the Japanese mountain yam, contained digestive enzymes like amylase that could assist a stressed gut in processing starch. They knew that black foods like sesame and black beans, used in Takigoji Yaeso's personal recipe, provided density and sustained energy. They did not have the vocabulary of AMPK pathways or neuropeptide modulation, but they observed the effects. They saw that men who ate the cinnamon balls stopped shivering. They saw that men who ate the ginseng balls did not panic. They saw that the fermented paste kept men alive when the rice ran out. There is a cold reality to the consumption of these rations. They were not pleasant. Recreations described the taste as a jarring mix of dirt, medicine, and overpowering sweetness. They were dense, requiring force to chew, or hard enough to require shattering with a mallet in the case of katayaki crackers. They were fuel, pure and simple. The sugar provided the immediate glucose for the brain to function, the starches provided the slow burn for the muscles, the herbs provided the hormonal control to endure the unendurable. A typical dosage was 5 to 7 balls a day, providing perhaps 1,500 to 2,000 calories. This is a deficit for an active soldier, but the metabolic stimulants allowed the body to bridge the gap by burning its own reserves more efficiently. The image of the ninja reversing the night, unseen and unheard, is incomplete without the understanding of what fueled him. He was a biological machine, running on a carefully calibrated fuel mixture. He carried his hearth and his adipocytes, ignited by cinnamon. He carried his calm in his bloodstream, stabilized by ginseng. He carried his endurance in his pouch, fermented and dry. The survival of the shinobi was not just a matter of martial skill, it was a triumph of pharmacological engineering. They survived because they mastered the chemistry of their own existence, turning the simple ingredients of the mountain's roots, seeds, and bark into a technology of resistance against the physical limits of the human form.